Once, long before chocolate eggs and glossy packaging, Easter was something very different. A time of bonfires, of bleeding eggs, of witches in the sky and willow branches striking skin. Today, it's a celebration dressed in pastel, but peel back the sugar-coated surface and you'll find stranger things buried beneath. Forgotten gods, fertility rites, fires to ward off the dead. These are the creepy Easter rituals we left behind. Welcome back, Darklings. Long before the resurrection, there was a goddess and a celebration stranger and older than Easter itself. We begin with a name few remember, Aostra, an ancient spring goddess said to bring the dawn, renewal, rebirth, and rising light. Her story comes from one of the earliest English historians, a monk named Bede, writing in the 8th century. He claimed that long before Easter became a Christian celebration, there were springtime rites held in her honour, when day and night stood equal, the vernal equinox. Though lost to time, the rites can be traced through echoes in older pagan traditions. Bonfires to banish winter, hares sacrificed or released into fields, feasting and festivities. In certain regions, public dances or processions ended in couples disappearing into the woods. It wasn't scandalous. It was ritual. Spring demanded life, and life demanded union. Ash from the fires may have been smeared on the skin or spread in the fields, a blessing, drawn from the death of winter itself. If these rites ever truly happened, they've long since been absorbed or deliberately buried. So could the entire festival of Easter bear her name. Some dispute the connection. The Church has long claimed that the word Easter comes from a different root entirely, but the symbols of hares, rabbits and eggs, and the fact that Easter still falls on the first Sunday after the full moon, following the spring equinox, all sounds rather pagan. And those symbols? They weren't always cheerful signs of spring. Eggs especially held power. They were buried in fields, laid on graves, broken open not for fun, but for answers, because before the egg became a decoration, it was a vessel of prophecy. In parts of England, it was said that if you cracked an egg at Easter and saw a red streak running through the yolk, someone close to you would die. But eggs could reveal more than death. They were read for signs to predict storms, births, misfortune. Some were even buried in fields to ensure a fertile crop. The egg was not sweet, it was sacred, dangerous. And if that wasn't unsettling enough, some said the egg could trap a spirit. Some traditions believed witches or evil spirits could hide inside an unbroken egg, especially if it had been left uneaten or discarded carelessly. There's also the idea that eggshells must be crushed after eating to prevent a spirit, a demon, or even the devil himself from using it as a vessel. In parts of Europe, old sailors would crush eggshells so witches couldn't use them as tiny boats to summon storms. Elsewhere, protection didn't come in the form of crushed shells. It came in fire. In Germany and the Netherlands, villagers built vast bonfires at Easter known as Osterfeuer, spring fire rituals meant to drive out winter and something else, witches. It was said that the flames could purify the land, ward off evil, and even prevent the devil himself from walking among the fields. Was this just superstition, or a remnant of something older? In Sweden and parts of Finland, Easter belongs to the witches. Children dress in rags and scarves, paint their faces, and go door to door for sweets. Not on Halloween, on Easter. It harks back to the belief that witches flew to a place called Blakulla on Maundy Thursday to feast with the devil. So people lit fires, burned birch, drew sigils on their doors. Easter was not just a time for resurrection, it was a time for protection. And not all Easter customs were about fear, some were about desire. In the Czech Republic and Slovakia, Easter Monday brings a strange tradition. Boys roam the villages, whipping girls with woven willow branches, not to harm them, but to bless them, to ensure youth, beauty, and fertility. In return, the girls offer painted eggs, sweets, or shots of plum brandy. It sounds bizarre, but the willow is sacred, a symbol of renewal, and the act is a living echo of old fertility rites. Similar customs were once found across pre-Christian Europe, where branches, greenery, or even ritualistic beatings were believed to awaken the life force in crops, in animals, and in people. And while humans played out their rites beneath the spring sun, something else was said to roam at dusk. Today we associate Easter with bunnies, small, soft, and sweet, but in pre-Christian Europe, it was the hare that held power. Hares were sacred to spring goddesses like Aostra and Ostara, linked to fertility, the moon, and mystery. They were solitary, nocturnal, and almost supernatural, appearing at twilight and moving in strange, unpredictable bursts. Unlike rabbits, which weren't established in Britain until the Normans in the 12th century, hares had been part of the landscape for centuries. By the 18th and 19th centuries, as spring festivals softened into something more childlike, rabbits replaced hares in popular imagery. Smaller, cuter, and easier to tame, they were perfect for Victorian postcards and chocolate moulds.
All praise, glory, and honor is most certainly due to the Most High Elohim of the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I want to say peace to each and every one of you in the name of His Son, Yehoshua HaMashiach, who we know as Jesus the Christ. So it's a blessing each and every single time that I can come before you to bring a message contained in His Word, and never do I count it a light thing to do so. In today's message, I want to deal with what today is, and that is Easter. This is the most venerated day in modern Christianity. However, this is a day that is not commanded to be observed. Furthermore, it is a day that is based in paganism. You see the paganism through the symbolism that you find associated with Easter. Even the name Easter is not of Christian origin or Hebraic origin. It more than likely comes from a Germanic pagan deity. Furthermore, you see the fertility symbolism associated with this day: Easter eggs, the Easter lily, bunnies, chicks, etc. These are all signs that this, like Christmas and Sunday worship, is of pagan origin. So what I want to do, as always, I want to go to the book and see what the book has to say, and maybe we can get some insight into whether or not we should be observing Easter. So I want to pick it up in John chapter 4 and verse 24 and find out something when we deal with worship. John 4 and chapter 24 reads, God is a spirit, or Elohim is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Okay, so now you cannot worship him any kind of way. You can't just make up days. You can't just bring your own standard. You must worship him according to the truth. Now the question is, what is the truth? Let's pick it up in Psalms, the 119th division. In Psalms 119, in this acoustic psalm, David writes the following. It says in Psalms 119 and 142, Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. Okay, so the law is Torah. Torah means instruction. This is where we get instruction on how we are to walk, what we are supposed to do. Let's go on further with this notion of what truth is. He goes on to write in Psalm 119 and 151, Thou art near, O Lord, and all thy commandments are true. So what do we have as a truth? His commandments are the truth, and his law is the truth. So what does he have written in his law pertaining to Easter? Well, let's see and look in Leviticus the 23rd chapter to see if we find anything about Easter. Leviticus the 23rd chapter and verse 1 reads, And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feast of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. Okay, so if these are his feasts, if these are the days we're supposed to observe, if these are the days that we're supposed to have holy convocations or sanctified gatherings, we will certainly see Easter here, but we don't. What do we see here? It begins with the Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath. He says, 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest and holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. So that's one of the 10 commandments, right? The fourth commandment is to honor the Sabbath day to keep it holy. But we don't, so not Sunday, by the way. There's no commandment to observe weekly Sunday worship. Okay, so you don't see, just like you don't see Christmas in this list. What you find is the Sabbath, and what we just had the Passover on the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. That's according to the Lord's calendar, which begins around March and April. Then you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread that comes immediately after that. You have first fruits, you have Pentecost, you have the memorial of the blowing of trumpets, you have Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and you have the Feast of Tabernacles. You don't see Easter. Okay. Now, this is a question we should ask ourselves. What is Easter? What is the doctrine associated with Easter? The doctrine associated with Easter is that Christ died, and Mashiach died on Good Friday and rose Easter Sunday. Well, see, if that is the case, then that means he's not the Messiah. I'm gonna say that again. If Yehoshua or if Jesus died on Good Friday and rose Easter Sunday, he is not the Messiah. Okay, how do you know that? Matthew the 12th chapter in verse 38. It says, Then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we will see a sign from thee. Verse 39 reads, But he answered and said unto them, An evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given to it but the sign of the prophet Jonas. That's Jonah. Verse 40 reads, For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Okay, so now if he has to be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, just like Jonah was in the whale's belly for 3 days and 3 nights, you can't get 3 days and 3 nights from Good Friday to Easter Sunday. So if he did die on Good Friday and rise Easter Sunday, that would mean he's not the Messiah. Furthermore, the Bible never said he died on Good Friday, and nor that he was resurrected on Sunday, early Sunday morning. See these sunrise services. See what you find is the principle of regeneration in nature around this time of Easter. That's what that's about. But this is Matthew the 26th chapter. So when did he actually die? Matthew the 26th chapter, verse 1. It says, And he came to pass when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, You know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. He died on the Passover. That's not a coincidence because he is the Passover lamb. See, you should be observing the Passover, not Easter. 1 Corinthians, the 5th chapter, and verse 7, notice what Paul said about Christ. He said in verse 7, Purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened, for even Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. See, he's our Passover lamb. That's why John the Baptist said in John 1 and verse 29, where he said, Behold the Lamb of God which taketh away the sin of the world. See, he didn't say he's the lamb. He's not our Easter bunny, right? It doesn't say that. So now some may say, well, doesn't the Bible mention Easter? Well, there is one mention of Easter in the Bible. But if you actually examine it, you will find that it is not referring to Easter at all. I know that sounds a bit weird, but let's look at it. This is Acts the 12th chapter. This is Acts the 12th chapter. And we're going to pick it up here in Acts 12 and verse 1. It says, Now about that time Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church. So this is the persecution of the saints. It says, And he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword. Remember, there's a question that this is a side note. The Messiah asked. He said, "Can they drink?" When their mother asked, "Can they sit on their right hand and on their left?" And he said, "In thy kingdom," he said, "Can they drink of the cup of which I drink of?" And he said, "They shall surely drink of it." This is what he was talking about. He was referring to the martyrdom. He said, "And he killed James, the brother of John, with a sword, and because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. So some would say, well, see seals the deal. That's the conclusion, right? I mean, we have Easter, but what is that word in Greek? That word is Pascha. What is Pascha? Passover. That's not. So that was they actually put the word Easter there, but the word in Greek is not Easter. The word is Pascha, which again means Passover. And Passover and Easter are not synonymous. They don't mean the same thing. Okay? So furthermore, you have another clue because in verse 3 it says, Then were the days of unleavened bread. What do we know about unleavened bread and Passover? Well, Passover is even referred to the day of preparation. Passover falls on the first day of on the 14th month of the first day, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is the 15th day of that same month. It's the very next day. So that lets you know what was going on. It was Passover. It wasn't Easter. They weren't celebrating Easter. Furthermore, Christ, just to show you further, Christ didn't die. Let's go to Matthew. Let's go to the Gospel according to Matthew, and we'll pick it up at verse 28. And just to show you, because remember, Christ had to be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. You can't get 3 days and 3 nights from Good Friday to Easter Sunday. He died on the Passover. He said, you know that after 2 days of the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. In Matthew the 28th chapter, in verse 1, he was resurrected. And notice the time when he was resurrected, because it says when Mary came to the sepulchre, he was already gone. When did she come? It says in the end of the Sabbath, of Sabbath, Sabbathon. That's the seventh. That's what we know as Saturday. As it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, that's Sabbathon here. It said came Mary Magdalene, the other Mary to the sepulchre. Okay, but what did they find out? In verse 5 it says, and the angel answered and said unto the women, Fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Jesus, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where the Lord lay. So he rose or was resurrected on the Sabbath. When the first day of the week came, he was already gone. And so he went in on the Passover, which fell on the Wednesday of that week. Okay, so he went in, and it was so you got Wednesday night, Thursday day, Thursday night, Friday day, Friday night, Saturday day, and Thursday he was gone. Again, you can't get that 3 days and 3 nights from Good Friday to Easter Sunday. Okay, so that's a little bit on that, and I encourage you to pick up an encyclopedia or go online on an online encyclopedia and look up Easter. And what you'll find is they will just more than likely they're going to describe Easter as a prominent day of veneration in the Christian religion, and then they're going to politely and try to be politically correct in explaining to you this. You don't have to dig deep. Just go to encyclopedia. It will tell you that this day is pagan. It more than likely comes from has pagan origins, right? Or I wrote this book some years ago, The Pagan Origins of Christian Holidays, where I have a number of that break down the pagan origin of a number of Christian holidays, including Easter. So with that, brothers and sisters, I encourage you to look these things out for yourself, and you want to make sure you know what you're doing. Okay? Let's go back to John, the 4th chapter, because you want to worship the correct way. The Bible tells you can't worship him any kind of way. You read in Matthew the 15th chapter, he says, In vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. You don't have we're not commanded to observe Easter. It's pagan. Again, the Easter egg hunts, the bunnies, the chicks, the lilies, the bonfires, all these are clues of the pagan origins of this day, the name itself. But I want to read something here that Yehoshua or Jesus said to the Samaritan woman at the well. He said in verse 22, Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. So now what does that mean? That means what was given unto Israel is what you are supposed to deal with when you're dealing in worship. Now, what was given to Israel? The feast days, which are a plan of salvation for man. Not Easter, not Christmas, not Sunday worship, not Halloween. With that, brothers and sisters, it's always my prayer that you were edified.